late
I
last
did.
night?
I did, man. Thankfully, because of the time change, I was up at 4 a.m. today, so I had plenty of time to watch UFC Nashville. Yes.
All right. So I stayed awake. Ally Quinta was a big reason I stayed awake. More on that coming up in the Ray Longo minute. But I want to open, of course, with Cub Swanson against Artem Lobov. Unanimous decision win for Cub Swanson. 49-46 times 2 and a 50-45. I thought it was a clean performance from Cub, who remains one of my favorite fighters, at least in terms of watchability on the roster, because, he puts himself in harm's way in order to get his offense accomplished. He takes on a fight against the number 25 or 30th guy in the world when he's the number 4 guy in the world, because it's a main event and he wants to prove his toughness and his skill and everything else. And just a lot of respect for Swanson's approach in that fight. A lot of respect for Lobov, obviously in defeat. Your thoughts on the main event over the weekend?
Yeah, I think this is exactly why Cub Swanson is such a popular fighter, or at least should be. I think the kind of creativity and offense that he showed was brilliant to watch. I think that he improved his defense, in my opinion. You talked about him putting himself in harm's way. Now, he definitely did here against Lobov, but I think that he did it in more of an intelligent manner. I think he was mixing things up a lot better. He was showing better angles. He was in and he was out. He wasn't just standing in front of his opponent like he did against Doo-Ho Choi. And yeah, I think, listen, I thought he lost the first round. I said, geez, man, was this a terrible idea from Cub Swanson? But the second, he was dominant. The third, he just got stronger. The fourth was even better. The fifth round, he was dominant yet again. It was an amazing performance. His ability to mix up strikes, his cartwheel kicks, his wheel kicks, that right hand right down the middle, which was just short and nasty, rocked Lobov repeatedly during that fight. I was blown away by Cub Swanson's performance. This was a fight where he had a lot to lose. He took it anyways as the number 4 guy in the world. Lobov wasn't even ranked. And I was looking at these stats, dude. I don't know if this is accurate, but if it is, and I think it is, it's remarkable. He landed 70% of his significant strikes and 72% of his total strikes. That's ridiculous, dude. 251 of 344 total strikes for Cub Swanson. Amazing. I'm not sure I've seen that stat before, unless it was like a minute fight.
Yeah, no, and this was obviously 25. He was on fire, and I'm glad you lauded his defense, because he definitely was sounder defensively than obviously in the Doo-Ho Choi fight. And the 209 significant strikes landed, single fight UFC WEC featherweight record. And we're going to get to Lobov in a second. But in terms of Cub Swanson here, Kenny, so he's now fought 40 minutes his last 2 fights dating to December against Doo-Ho Choi and Artem Lobov. And at least to my amateur eyes, he's done everything in his power to try to get these 2 guys out of there, right? And he'll have to settle for 2 fight of the night bonuses. He doesn't get the finish, right? And I think when it's number 4 versus number 35, and you're a prohibitive betting favorite, a lot of the emphasis is on trying to maximize the showcase and get the other guy out of there, with which Cub Swanson was not able to do. So as we spin it forward for Cub, he came in number 4 in the world, 4 in a row since losses to Frankie Edgar and Max Holloway back-to-back end of 2014, April of 2015. So he's now undefeated for 2 years. He's won 4 in a row. Could rematch Ricardo Lamas, I guess, who's number 3 in the world. I'm not sure if Lamas has a fight on the books right now. Otherwise, perhaps it's a title fight, against the Holloway-Aldo winner. At least Cub, I think, has put himself on the short list now at 145.
Yeah, I agree. Or maybe have the ability to rematch Frankie Edgar if he gets by Yair Rodriguez, or fight Yair if Yair gets the win. I think that would be an interesting fight as well.
Ooh, Swanson Rodriguez. Both
Imagine?
Jackson guys, right?
Ooh.
No, yeah, right?
Two ninjas in the cage, bruh.
Are they both Jackson guys? I think Yair trains at Jackson's.
But Yair, I don't think he trains there anymore.
All right, well,
I think he does most of his training in Chicago, but either way,
yeah, that's
just
right.
make it happen, right?
Yeah,
we can see that.
I would imagine they've trained together in the past, but they don't seem to be buddy like Swanson and Lando Venata per se. So Big win for Cub Swanson. And how about the plucky Artem Lobov, the Russian hammer? And when you look at the record, the mixed martial arts record, he's fought up in weight classes. He's taken on all comers. And, a lot of people didn't think he was worthy of this type of opportunity. I think at the very least, he showed the toughness and the heart of a guy who I think is at the very least, worthy of a roster spot,
Now he has an iron chin. Couldn't agree with you more. And for him to go 5 hard rounds against the number 4 guy in the world, I think really says a lot. And it proves that him asking for this fight wasn't such a bad idea. And Brian Stan kept talking about it. This was a fight where he was only gonna gain popularity and status. So I think he made the right choice in calling out Cub Swanson. He had his moments. I thought he had a solid first round. And when you have a guy who is willing to trade like Artem Lobov, and when you have a guy that shows that kind of heart, I mean, how can you not love the guy? I think Lobov was very impressive.
And a guy who fights stylistically that way is even more of a risky proposition for a guy like Cub Swanson. And I'm reading here, MMAJunkie.com, Ben Folks. It's Swanson who got the rougher end of the exchange, since how's he supposed to make the case for career advancement off a decision win against a guy who was a walking punchline before this? And I wouldn't go so far as to call Artem Lobov a walking punchline, but people had denigrated his past performances, and he's still a guy because of the way he throws, and even though limited in terms of his range at times, that can knock you out with one strike. So good for Cub Swanson getting the win over the weekend, and we'll see how they match make him going forward, and we'll see what happens with Artem Lobov. Now certainly more people know his name than did prior, and I think this main event will serve him well going forward. Al Iaquinta, raging Al Iaquinta, the inimitable, the one and only Raging Al, gets your old friend Diego Sanchez out of there in just under 2 minutes, Kenny. Nice return, obviously, for Al for the first time in 2 years. Willing opponent and obviously a winnable fight. He was a 4-1 favorite. In a lot of respects, this is what he was supposed to go in there and do. But again, man, I have a hard time staying up for these FS1 shows. I'm not working on the East Coast. I stayed awake because Raging Al was fighting. Like, he kept me up. And, I don't know. That just speaks to how much appeal he has for me as a fighter. And, put on a show over the weekend, I thought.
The dude's an animal. I mean, Raging is the perfect nickname for him. He's an absolute maniac, as is Diego Sanchez, by the way.
He is.
But for different reasons. Iaquinta went in there, and he looked very composed, man. He looked very relaxed. He wasn't forcing the knockout. When he had Diego hurt, he really went for it, showed his killer instinct yet again. This is a guy, and Ali Iaquinta, I think that if he doesn't get signed with the UFC, it's going to be a shame to see him go, man, because back when we saw him on The Ultimate Fighter Live, a show that you did, of course, I always thought that this is a guy who could be a contender. I really thought he was a guy who could possibly have the belt in the UFC, and it's a shame if he does go. Obviously, very critical of the organization, unfortunately, right. So that's not going to help. But Al, getting a guy in Diego Sanchez out of there early, I thought was very impressive. Not many people can knock out Sanchez cold like that. And he was just faster. He had the cleaner technique on the feet. Diego just not able to get anything going.
A big part of the challenge for Al Iaquinta is going to be staying healthy and keeping that knee right. And I think that sort of dovetails a little bit with the monetary issue for him, right? Putting his body through hell in training and not having the means to show for it at the end of a training camp or a fight. And obviously he was very vocal about not receiving a bonus. Still some gray area in terms of whether or not he is eligible to receive bonuses based upon some things that happened in the past. And again, more on this with Ray Longo in about 10 minutes. But here's Al Iaquinta, Kenny, ranked number 14 in the world. I'm a hardcore MMA fan, and I'm telling you that this guy keeps me up, right, to watch a show at night. But I don't know the extent to which he moves the needle. I don't know how to quantify Al Iaquinta's value to the UFC. Right. He's in a tough division. He's 14th in the world at 155 pounds. I think the quickest way for him to, realize the millions he wants to, and maybe quickest is the wrong word, but is to, vault into the top 5, beat a top guy, and challenge for the UFC title, right? I mean, it's hard if you don't get into those big fights for him to realize the type of payday that I think he believes he deserves.
You're absolutely right, but just to kind of show his potential, look where Jorge Masvidal is at right now. Now, I know that was a controversial fight against him, but look how well he did against a guy like Masvidal, who right now is one of the top welterweights in the world, might get the title shot if he gets through Maia. So it shows his potential. And hopefully they can work this out. It's not going to be easy, obviously, after Iaquinta's comments. But, yeah, I can't wait to talk to our boy Ray about this.
I really think, though, you stay active, right, and try to, not take a Cerrone approach necessarily, because maybe then your momentum all goes away. I mean, the win streak obviously is something that he has to prioritize now, maybe more so than finishing guys, but obviously stiffer challenges await than our man Diego Sanchez. And yeah, there are a lot of winnable fights, Kenny, as I look at this top 15, and I just feel like I want to hear him say, I think I'm the best in the world. I want to get right back in there. Because I think people do want to see him fight increasingly. And I also think there's an interesting dynamic because, Dana, I think, really likes Al Iaquinta. Obviously, he's close with Matt Serra and Ray Longo, so I'm hoping this all blows over. And I do believe Al is still under contract, if I'm not mistaken. So an interesting backdrop to that, but certainly took care of business against Diego Sanchez.